Thank you for attending this press conference. Obviously, we're very pleased that the Commission and the chair of the Elections Commission has stopped the house-to-house exercise at their registration. We pointed out that the entire attempt was ill-advised and possibly the way that it was being pursued was unconstitutional. That is to replace people who had already been registered. We expressed the fear that given the PNC's track record and the history of house-to-house registrations in Guyana, that this exercise would have been used to disenfranchise thousands of Guyanese by tampering with the electoral roll and the NRR. That could have been done in many ways. One, by registering fake people. Two, by deregistering thousands of Guyanese under the spurious claim that they were not found, and therefore their names would have been removed. People who would have voted the last elections would not have had the right to vote. And we believe that this would have run into thousands of people, would have disenfranchised people in South Georgetown, in the PPP strongholds, in the hinterland communities where it's difficult to register people, that had this exercise as originally conceived continued, then tens of thousands of Guyanese who had voted in the past would have lost the right to vote because they would have not been on the list. And so, recognizing the motive of the PNC here, APNU, we went to the courts. And thankfully, the court ruled that the house-to-house registration to remove people's names from the NRR who had been previously registered would be unconstitutional. And therefore, it was only logical that GCOM stops the exercise, because it's a waste of time and money. Because if you cannot remove people's name from the register, why re-register them? And we know that GCOM claims that it had registered now so far 285,000 people. But I would take a guess based on extrapolation of previous registration activities that 200 and maybe over 280,000 of those people are people who are already on the list and therefore cannot be removed. And therefore, the entire exercise was a waste of time. But one thing that Guyanese must understand is what APNU did in this period. APNU aggressively went across Guyana and misled its supporters once again. They lied to the whole country with the promises that they made in 2015. They never fulfilled those promises. But as of last month, they were lying again to their supporters, telling them if you register, you have to re-register. And they knew, I'm sure that APNU knew that the exercise was illegal in the way it was conceived, because they're not stupid people. But they were clever in trying to misrepresent the issue and create confusion on the ground. And so they misled tens of thousands of people, particularly their supporters, on this exercise. And I hope that the people who were urged to do this redundant exercise by APNU for fear of losing the vote, that their names would be removed from the list, that those people recognize how once again APNU has misled them. But one would have thought that the misleading of Guyanese would have stopped at that point in time, once the decision is made by GCOM or was made by GCOM and announced. But in today's newspapers, the Chronicle, where I know Chronicle can't be used as the source of truth, but I am sure that they would not misquote our dear caretaker Prime Minister, caretaker rubber stamp Prime Minister. The front page of Chronicle says, "Do not panic. House to House still ongoing, was not scrapped," says Prime Minister. Imagine now, in today's paper, this caretaker government, caretaker president, caretaker prime minister, says to people, don't panic, House to House still ongoing, it was not scrapped. And the GCOM press release says it ends on August 31st. So, if you register 285,000 people so far, and there are close to 700,000, maybe 650,000, because that includes up to 14 years, the 14-year-old too, for the creation of the new NRR, or to be added to the NRR. They've only completed just over a third, and he said, and in 2 days, they must complete the rest of it, because based on, if you believe this useless prime minister that we have, useless caretaker prime minister. And this is the misleading. Chronicle and the PNC continues, APNU, AFC, all of them, they continue to mislead people until now today, saying House to House was not scrapped. How can you ever believe these people to fulfill any promise that they make to Guyanese? Any promise that they make. We've seen how they're treated our Constitution already, but to lie so blatantly to their supporters. Just imagine all of those people who were in that room still believing that House to House registration was not scrapped, when it was. And this is what they thrive on. So let me say that this country, not the PPP alone, but many others have joined in this fight to fight off the contamination of the voters' list and the potential removal of people's names from the voters' list who had voted before, which we fought that off collectively to safeguard the right of all Guyanese, the right of every single Guyanese. Whichever party you belong to, we preserve the right to vote. If you had voted in the past elections, your name would have been on the list. We always said you don't need to register again. Only people who have not registered in the past, only they need to register now and to get their names on the voters list, so that all of our people, whoever chooses to vote on that day, that their names are already on the list, they can exercise the franchise. This is what we have won here. And it's not a PPP victory, it's a victory for voters of Guyana, all of our people. That's the first point. Now, secondly, you would have seen that GCOM said that they want to merge the data collected so far. So let us go through this in a simple fashion. So the NRR is here and it can't be touched. The National Register of Registrants, from which the voters list is extracted, is secure because you can't remove any name from it based on the Chief Justice's ruling. So you went out to an exercise and you registered 285,000 people. So of the 285,000, say 283,000 are people who were registered in the past and you re-registered. You can't add their names, merge their names onto the database because their names will be there on the database twice. They're already registered and you can't remove them. So it's as simple as that. And why I'm coming up with 283,000? Because in a normal cycle of registration, you would have about 6,000 new registrants. So if you've completed about a third of the work, one would assume that you have to divide the 6,000 by 3, around that. So you'd have about 2,000 new registrants in the 285,000 people registered. So you can't put those people merge their names onto the old database because their names are already there. So only the 2,000 now you have to transfer there. So guess what they propose to do? Now these names are still in forms that the ROs, the enumerators did. They will take all 285,000 names and then go and input them now on a database, which will take several months to do. And then after you do that for maybe a month or two, then you consider merging the two just to find out the 2,000 new names of the new registrants, because you can't merge the people who are already on the old list, or you would have a duplication. So that is what they're trying to do. Now, imagine about 2,000 people. We have 20 registration divisions, say permanent ones. If you divide 2,000 by 20, you get 100 persons. So all you have to do is to say to those 100 people, come in and re-register, the 100 per division. And then we save 3 months, because I've seen their latest work program. And with this merger, the most optimistic scenario is to go to claims and objections in November, because the merger will take about 3 months. And then elections on the 27th of April next year. So you understand that this merger will not improve the database. It is a delaying tactic once again. It will not improve the database. If you don't merge the data, you have a simpler way of capturing all these people by getting the 2,000 who have registered of the 285,000, the new ones, to just go back and get registered. And this time in an environment that is consistent with GCOM's manual, which says that it must be done in the presence of scrutineers from the parties. The last time it was not done through this exercise. And so our point is that, and the data itself that is collected, the 285,000, might also be all illegally collected, because they changed the statutory form, the form in the law for the house-to-house registration, and replaced it with another form that did not get the approval of the Commission nor Parliament. So my point is this so-called merger, a lot of people thinking, oh, what are they going to merge with what? Clearly, you can't merge the 285,000 with the existing database because most of the people are already registered. So in sorting this out now, they take ages. And that is what we are opposed to. We're opposed to the timeline it takes to do this when there's a simple way of ensuring everyone gets on the voters list. You call claims and objection, you extract the list, now the preliminary voters list from the existing NRR, you open the 20 offices, you can even maybe double the offices, say 30, 40, and you hold claims and objection, and every person who, new person can be registered and get on the list. Easy, simple way of going forward in the presence of all the scrutineers. So that is what we now attempting. That is to ensure that this so-called merger of on their verified data with a verified database doesn't contaminate the database, that's one, and two, doesn't fall into APNU's plan again to delay the elections using this so-called merger, which is unnecessary for another 3 months, delay the election for another 3 months. Not to be held within 3 months because they want next year, April next year. So this is the new fight for decency, and that is what the APNU commissioners keep fighting for in there. On one hand, they say we want elections before the end of the year, but the arguments by their commissioners, publicly and privately, are designed to slow things down. I've seen Vincent Alexander saying that the Chief Justice ordered that the data from the house-to-house activity be used. You go and read the judgment. There is no such order. And this was repeated in the GCOM's press release. It was repeated in the GCOM's press release based on the ruling of the Chief Justice on the 14th of August 2019 that house-to-house registration is not unlawful and is constitutional. The data garnered from the registration exercise must be merged with the existing, NRR. It's nowhere in the judgment will you find that. And whilst the Chief Justice found the exercise itself, house-to-house exercise is not unlawful, it would be unlawful to remove people's name from the database, unconstitutional. That is what was found. So this is wrong, and then the third point was wrong too in the press release. It says, in this regard, the Commission will move to an extensive claims and objections exercise before extracting the preliminary list of electors. You have to go to claims and objections with a PLE, not after. The PLE is not extracted after the claims and objection. You go to the list. So we're continuing the struggle to ensure that we have free and fair elections, that APNU will not get any opportunity to tamper with the database, that every Guyanese who's eligible must, once they get registered, and there must be an opportunity for them to register, get on the voters list, and whether they want to vote on election day or not, that's their business, but they must have an opportunity to be on this list. And that's one, and that the constitutional timeline, the Chief Justice pointed out, where the GCOM is not operating in a normal election cycle. The constitutional, we ought to have had elections by March 31st. The government is unconstitutional. We have a caretaker president. We have a caretaker ministers who operate as though they have full authority. They're still doing outreaches. Now, imagine this nonsense that Chronicle continues to call this outreach, ministerial outreach. This is campaigning. They're campaigning using state money and misleading people, as you saw. Lying to them. You know, Nagamotu, house to house, not scrap. This is what we have. So I hope that people understand what is at stake. When they hear merge, a lot of people get confused and all of that sort of stuff. And we've had a lot of calls where all 285,000 names will go to the old database. That would cause duplication. That can't happen. They're looking to merge 2,000 names with the others, but take 3 months in doing so. When basically you can get those names within weeks and get people re-registered. So we have to be extremely, extremely cautious about this. I notice that Lincoln Lewis has said that we want to direct GCOM what to do. We're not attempting to direct GCOM what to do. If anything, it's the APNU commissioners who have frustrated GCOM from exercising its constitutional responsibility. APNU commissioners and the chairman, illegal chairman who was appointed by the president. Imagine after 8 months, they haven't started preparing for elections as yet. After 8 months after the passage of a no confidence motion, when the Constitution says elections have to be held in 3 months, and we haven't gone to claims and objections yet to prepare the OLE. They have been doing that. But we will robustly make our arguments in the public because we have a duty to explain to Guyanese what is happening within GCOM. So I just want to, since I mentioned Lincoln Lewis and he said, Mr. Jagdeo, let GCOM do its work. You do yours. That's what I'm doing. I'm exposing the wickedness of this government in not complying with the Constitution, that our caretaker president makes a serially correlated excuse where he says, oh, I'm waiting on GCOM to tell me when I should call the elections, and then sends his commissioners over there to frustrate the holding of elections. We're exposing their attempt to deregister thousands of people. That was done. We're exposing their attempt to slow down the process now by creating confusion about this so-called merger. We're exposing people like Nagamutu and the others lying to the people of Guyana once again. We are doing our works. Our work. Is Lincoln Lewis doing his? But obviously this is his work too, as part of their PR team to misrepresent issues. He is one of the people I'm talking about to sow a lot of confusion. So in the same article, I didn't want to mention much about it because Lincoln Lewis has become their new spokesperson. He says, when the Burnham government moved to nationalize bauxite and sugar, the two major pillars of our economy, nation was placed above partisanship. Both Burnham and Jagan sat down, worked out strategies and programs to give effect to the nation's aspiration, then moved to the parliament and legislated. So he ignored the entire Chedi Jagan struggle for all those years of free and fair elections and the rigging of elections. But oh, this was so great, there was major collaboration between Chedi Jagan and Burnham. Ignores Chedi Jagan's struggle for free and fair elections, which is relevant now. The same things that we saw happen in the past, they attempted to do it. But today, in this context, in the context where our people are more vigilant, more educated, have more access to information than in that period, they failed in their attempt because they did exactly the same thing by registering people from areas that were non-existent. I urge people to look back at the history and some of the documentaries done in that period about how they rigged the elections. And people like Felix and many others within the APNU, they were at the center of the rigging process. So they're very familiar with those methods. So Lincoln Lewis will not say a word about that. He says there is clear absence on the part of the opposition to discharge its constitutional responsibilities. We are not discharging our constitutional responsibility. So, and he wants us to discharge our constitutional responsibility. This is what he says. The refusal of the leader of the opposition to return to Parliament is an abrogation of constitutional responsibility, highlighting a shortcoming in his leadership as the nation's second highest political office holder. So I must go back to Parliament to extend the life of an illegal government, a government that has suffered a defeat in a no confidence motion where the Constitution is clear, a government that continues to defy court rulings, etc. And I must clothe them with respectability, and then I will be discharging my constitutional responsibility. Lincoln Lewis must think that the people of this country are extremely stupid. That we must do that now. We must continue, give the government, never mind our constitution, never mind the court ruling, never mind everything else, never mind the large-scale thievery and everything that's going on and the fat fouling that Lincoln and the others are beneficiaries of. We must just go back and say we are discharging our responsibility. How long do you need? 4 years more? Extend the life of government for the next 4 years. This is the level of ridiculousness that passes off as analysis. And then he goes on to talk about our track record and what we did in bauxite. And let me tell you, in bauxite, with Roussel, etc., people like Lincoln Lewis were misleading the bauxite workers. I remember at Arorima, when there was talk of a merger between Arorima and Burmine, they went on the ground, including Lincoln Lewis, and actively spoke up against the merger. He said that we wanted to rip people off, that they should never be merged, etc. When Alcoa walked away from Arorima, we had just walked away from it, and the workers were going to lose all their jobs there. And when the company used to deal with electricity and water and all of these things, we had to buy back Arorima, take it back, because it was in private hands. We took it back in government. We invested and we kept the operations going for the workers. We took over water and electricity and gave a subsidy so that the community could continue to have water and electricity in the Kwakwani area. That is our approach, unlike theirs on sugar, when it ran into difficulty. Then what happened at Burmine, they lost the contract, the workers there. And we had to go in and take over that too. We paid the workers severance. We found house lots on the coast for workers, like at Glasgow and all of these areas. Personally, I visited there. They didn't want to see Lincoln Lewis, the bauxite workers, didn't want to see him, because all he was doing is sloganeering and lying to them. And we made sure that when we looked for a company to invest, and that's how Roussel and Ollendorff came. And as a result of that, until today, close to 800-900 people still are working in the Berbice River and in New Amsterdam because of this and feeding their families. That was our approach to the bauxite industry. People like Lincoln Lewis and the others, they opposed it because these were our people. We didn't say, 100% of the votes came from Kwakwani, went to APNU. It didn't matter to us. These were our people. And then he goes on to say there are tax exemptions, that the PPP gave the foreigners tax exemptions and low royalties. We did that in the context of the bauxite to keep the jobs there because it's not a profitable venture. But he doesn't say a word about the oil and gas sector now, where you have a zero royalty. We give low royalty payments, etc., and that was for bauxite is struggling to make ends meet. And in the oil sector, they give zero royalty, more tax concessions than any company ever got in Guyana. And he doesn't find it strange about this. He criticizes the PPP for what we did in the bauxite areas to maintain the jobs there. When you listen to, and every week they do this, these are the new forces to distort. So they will come back, it's a pattern now. They raise all the lies. These lies were told in the 2014-2015 period. And they're getting the same characters, these fossils. Notice the fossils coming out, rolling them out, and lying once again to the Guyanese people. But the lies don't end there. So the lies go on. You have another set. The APNU column speaks about, so that's one thing, about how we treated bauxite workers badly because they're Afro-Guyanese, etc. Untrue. I can go through what we did in Linden, the investments we made in Linden, in the bauxite industry, in education and in health and in water and housing and all of these things, running into billions of dollars. And you can see them visible up to today when you go through those areas, the visible investments. The area was depressed. So that's the first set of narrative. They're coming back. The campaign has started. They roll these fossils out to repeat the lies of the past. The next set of thing is, oh, PPP killed a lot of young Afro-Guyanese. That's the next set of campaign, and it was a narco state under the PPP. Well, we've gone through this already. For 15 years, they use a list of 400, saying we killed 400 of young black kids. And these were their words. When we really examined the list, we saw that the list had maybe 20% were Indo-Guyanese. A lot of the people's names there were victims of crime. They had the people who killed them were also on the list. The victims as well as their killers were on the list. The policemen who were killed by the bandit were on the list. People who had heart attacks, at least 2, were on the list that we killed. That was their propaganda, spreading it in the communities and the villages that we were doing this. Granger had an opportunity. He used to talk about this. He had an opportunity to launch a commission of inquiry. This man has launched commissions of inquiry into everything under the sun. Why not do it for the entire period? Or, for that period that they said, or these extrajudicial killings. He did it for Lindo Creek and put Trotman father to give him a favorable thing and blame our security forces. Our soldiers got blamed, not fine man who massacred people, killed a ton of people in Bartica and Agricola and Lusignan, etc. But he got absolved, and guess who got blamed? Our security forces. But why didn't they do the commission of inquiry when we called for it too, on what took place at all these places, Bartica, Agricola, Lusignan, and the escape from the prison, and what took place in Buxton? Who visited the people in Buxton? Who were the political leaders visiting the bandits in Buxton? Who were helping to create safe haven for them? Who were the lawyers for the bandits? Known killers who massacre people, who were the lawyers? It all could be traced to APNU. We have said that until now, I mentioned 2 names, Garland Fecker and Orange Schultz, who were working with Trotman. How were they killed just here in Georgetown? Suspect. And so a lot of these things, they mentioned Roger Khan, about Roger Khan, and Roger Khan put out an ad saying that he was Felix's best friend, an ad in the newspapers, and that he was willing to take a lie detector test whether Felix would do the same. You have the conversations where Basil Williams called Felix and said to him, boy, you help us out at Agricola. Why would a senior member of the PNC at that time called the Commissioner of Police to say, after the massacre, you helped us out? You look at this. That is why they didn't want to go there. So they're going to go in the communities and say, oh, PPP killed a lot of young people. But they were in the center of things this afternoon. And that is why, so that's the next, I see they continue with this, a narco state. Imagine you have many, I said the last time, not a single person has been charged for money laundering. You remember how they used to rant and rave about, oh, the economy is filled with narco money and any building going up is funded from narco dollars and stuff? Well, what about now? How many narco dealers or smugglers have they apprehended? Not the guy with the spliff who's smoking, I'm not talking about him, who's smoking on the street corner, because that seemed to be their only focus. The people on the street corner. And even lying about that too, about the decriminalizing of the small quantities of marijuana, possession of small quantities. But it's the big guys. Not a single case of money laundering file. And then on top of that, if a member, a distant member of the PPP had, I mentioned this the last time, they had done anything of that nature, like being in smuggling of drugs and got caught. Imagine by now what would have happened. The whole campaign would have been about, you see what we're saying? The PPP is in smuggling. We have a brother of a minister, and until now we don't know how he passed through the airport or whatever else, who got caught with cocaine in a regional territory. They're gone quiet on that. We have another person who was prominent in their campaign, now prominent in their campaign and funded their campaign, who is in prison in the US for the prescription drugs the smuggling. You've had a person who was convicted of terrorism in the United States of America, who was an MP of theirs. We could easily call PNC, the whole PNC, terrorists if we use these examples. But we have not gone down that route. That's not where we are. We stick with our policies, jobs, education, etc. Progress to the country. But I'm just telling you that will surface again. That's another thing that will surface. And then the racism. The racism will surface now again. So James Bond went into Campbellville and told the kids there about must not vote for these. He doesn't want these coolie people to come back in. And that is what he said. We're getting a statement. And I hope that the people write the Ethnic Relations Commission. Last night, they had a meeting with Felix and Hetty Meyer pushing the same line. Going to hear more about that meeting. They've started back the whisper campaign of racism. This is what they're good on about. So it is bringing back the old things and talking about this. And imagine, then Nagamutu now gets into the act to talk about corruption. He speaks about corruption. So, you know the old play card from 2014? Imagine the most corrupt government in this hemisphere at this point in time and in our entire history, talking about corruption. Everybody got their hands in something, including Nagamutu. And he, remember the man said, the man who got the drug bond, that how he was giving Nagamutu largesse, that Nagamutu was collecting largesse from him, and how Nagamutu's son-in-law tried to sell this Kelden estate. You remember, they don't understand these things, that people have gone past this. So the old playbook comes out once again. The old APNU playbook, all accusations, stirring the racism, and talking about corruption. It's not going to resonate now. Now, on the other hand, we're talking policies about the future. And this is why, if you look at, we've already been putting out some of our policies. So let me just inform you that our manifesto will have several versions. So you've already started seeing us putting out through some posters some of the policies that we plan to institute immediately upon a change in government. And then we're going to do a more popular version of the manifesto. And then a detailed technical version of the manifesto will be launched as we get closer to the elections, which will give a lot of more explanations to people as to our policy making and the vision. We can't do that through the posters, but at least people understand what we are going to do. And I want to just spend a couple of minutes. You've seen on some key ones. So people say, what's the difference between no new taxes that you're saying and reversing all these tax measures, the taxes that APNU put in place? So APNU has, with an increase in fees and taxes, it's over 200 new measures. They've either increased the fees or put in place new taxes. And we said we're going to reverse most of them, in fact, if not all, of reversal back to either status quo or at a lower level. So we made that clear, that's reversals. In that regard, you will see, for example, VAT on the building material, because they put the value-added tax on sand, stone, cement, etc. We want people to build more. We don't want them to pay taxes on these issues. There were no taxes when the PPP was in office. We'll remove the taxes on those. For example, no VAT on electricity. You see, no VAT on electricity. Already electricity bills are too high. We want the VAT, they put the tax of a tax on electricity bill now. That will be reversed. VAT on exports. Who taxes exports? You want your country to export more, earn more foreign currency, your people to work more, create more jobs. The more you can export, the more jobs you can create. They put a VAT on exports. We want to reverse the VAT on farming, mining, and forestry equipment. This has created untold problems for our farmers, our miners, people in the forestry sector, because now they have their equipment would be very expensive. I met with some small loggers, etc. And having to pay tax on their equipment now just pushes them out of production. We want that change. So we want to reverse the land rent and drainage and irrigation charges. That's making cattle rearing, rice farming, all of these things basically much harder. A lot of the people in Region 5 now have a hard time. Almost 1,000 families have now been able to pay their bills or the new charges, and they may face bankruptcy and they may lose their land or go to have court proceedings filed against them because of these unconscionable increases, like from 3,005 to 15,000 per acre per year. Reverse tax, new taxes on Guyanese miners. And notice we say Guyanese miners here, Guyanese miners, that they have changed the entire environment in which people work. So I can go through reverse VAT on data. You can't want ICT, want everybody to use more data, young people, and then tax the data too. And to reverse the age limit on imported vehicles, that will be done too, because you can take at least $1.2 million off the price of a vehicle simply by changing this policy. We're going back to what we had. That makes it a little bit more affordable to young people or first-time owners of vehicles. And then removing the VAT on water. So those are the reversals. There are lots of them. I don't want to enumerate all of them, like on hinterland travel and all of these things, but the reversals first, and then a promise of no new taxes. So when you vote at the elections, you know in the 5 years period, you're not going to have an additional tax burden. You get the reversals here, but you don't have to face additional tax burden from a government. Like how people have every budget, they have had to worry about new taxes all the time. So that's the difference between the two. University and the scholarship. So we will explain this in greater detail when the manifesto is, the technical version of the manifesto is done, or as we go along in the next few months. But the online scholarships is a program for how people can apply, and this will be 20,000 online scholarships. So there'll be an office that allows people to apply and for this, and this is in addition to what is being done at the University of Guyana. So this would help private education, but also help a large number of people to work or to get scholarships in professions that may not be offered by the University of Guyana. And so that is one thing that is critical for us, the online scholarships. And secondly, the free university within 5 years. Now, we could have easily said free university from day one, but we're not APNU. They promised free university, they increased the university fee by 35%. We're not going to do that. We make it clear that within the 5 years, that we'd be able to do it. Whether it's year 2 or year 3, because we believe the way it's going now, we're looking at running the numbers, that maybe probably in year 2 or 3, we can move into this policy. But that's why we're being cautious by saying within the 5 years. But you know, once we promise it, it's going to be done. Because we are now making wild promises. If people want wild promises, they're going to go with APNO, which they have no plan, including David Iden said, they will not deliver the promise in the future, but still vote for them. So we're not going to do that. We are planning to deliver. That is why everything is costed here. And so we ran the numbers, and we believe this can be done. We intend to do it, but within the five years. There's also our candidate, our finale, would roll out some additional measures that we hope to implement to stimulate private offering of education, not just the state. And he would also roll out a plan how we intend to address people who have outstanding fees at the University of Guyana. He will, how we will help them too. So you will hear about those shortly. So we have a comprehensive approach here. But I don't want for a moment people to think that our focus is only confined to tertiary education, because it's also at the tech VOC level and at the different levels, the primary, secondary, nursery, primary, and secondary schools. They also have plans for improvement in those areas. The overall objective of the PPP government will be to have a world-class, because we'll have a bit more resources from our revenue to pump into education and to get a world-class education for all of our people. So that is one thing, something I wanted to talk about a bit here. The restoration of the bonus to joint services. It's now in black and white. It's on our poster. It will be in our manifesto. And this is not a bribery, as Jordan said. This will be a done deal. They will get back their bonuses. About small business, support for small business with grants and interest-free loans. We have already done that. We left some facilities that they're still using, but this will be on a larger scale to promote entrepreneurship. There are lots of, well, cheaper, more reliable electricity, all of these things. But you will see, I don't want to be comprehensive now. I just wanted to start so you can start focusing on the issues. You see the posters going out. Soon you will see a popular version of the manifesto. Please read it. I hope that people will take the time to read through it, because this is our plan for all Guyana, all the people. And let me say, part of that is bringing our people together. There'll be no, unlike them, no whisper campaign. And depending, when you go to South Georgetown, you say one thing, and when you go to Amerindian areas, you say another message. You know, or they're spending all the money there. One message for all Guyana that the PPP has. Whether you're any race, any religion, you belong to any political party, one message. This is our plan for all of our people. They must all benefit from it. And we're going to roll out extensively how people will benefit from the oil and gas sector. We'd roll that out in the near term. But one of the things you've seen, that we made it clear that this has to, more Guyanese have to benefit from this. The way it's structured now is that the foreigners are going to hog everything. Hog everything. And that can't be sustainable in the long run. There are just a couple of things. I saw this Cummingburg Accord. And really, can you tell me what this is about? This is an accord and negotiations behind, in secret, behind closed doors. And guess what these negotiations are about? Not about improving the lives of Guyanese, not about fulfilling the promises they make for a good life, cheaper or better education, more jobs, improvement in pensions, etc. Guess what they're negotiating? Splitting the spoils of office. How many ministers you gonna get and how many I gonna get? That's their big preoccupation. David Hines said they should get a few less, we gotta get a few more. And why? And I heard the fight is over the prime ministries, prime for thievery. So that is where the big is, how they will split the spoils of office in the future. Not about their promises or whether they did well or not. That's not what they're negotiating. This is what the Cummingburg Accord is, about power sharing among themselves, this cabal. Who gets what? And who gets a chance to thief more than the other through these ministries. That is it. And I say these words because it's obscene what they're doing. It's unbelievable. Had this happened under the PPP, like you have this large-scale giveaway of land now done secretly by NISIL and the others. It's happening right before our eyes now. If that had happened under us, you would have an open warfare in the country. Open warfare. And this is what they're negotiating. So every time you hear the Cummingburg Accord now, just think about it for a moment. What is it that they're really doing there? Is it that they're looking to improve our lives? Would the plight of the farmer be raised at that meeting, or the miner, or the single mother, or the taxi drivers, or the joint services? No, that's not what they will be discussing. They're discussing how many positions you get. That is what is Cummingburg Accord. And so we must demystify it. It's not now, oh, we're sharing proposals. What were you sharing proposals for? To get to split up positions. That is their proposal. So don't make it seem intellectual. It is about greed. That is the Cummingburg Accord. It's about splitting up positions. I see the Berbice Bridge has surfaced back again. A new election, Berbice Bridge jumped up back again. Remember the local government elections? Now again, and by the $9,000 minister. And then again, let me just finish with this. I see there another fossil of theirs, a GHK Lal. So he again clothes these things about so today's paper, oh, there will be a nastiness emerging. There'll be no nastiness on the part of the PPP. Nastiness emerging, etc. Nastiness is coming from James Bond and Felix and Timaya and many of the others on their side. From our side, we will carry a campaign that will focus on the message, what we intend to do. Our campaign is not about dividing people. Our party is working hard to get more Afro-Guyanese to join it. Our party has recognizing that deficiency. Our party has made it clear that any government that we head will work for all Guyanese regardless of their race. We are carrying a national message for our people. There will be no nastiness on our side, no racism or any of those things. So he should look within. Any nastiness that will come from them. And so I just wanted to end there to say that on the verification issue, we have to be cautious. Not the verification, the merger, cautious about that. That the GCOM, all we're saying to GCOM, without telling them what to do, that there's the Constitution of Guyana stands above everything else. And the caretaker president is not respecting the Constitution, but we have great faith that in the new leadership, GCOM will. Thank you.
Mr. Jagdeo, you said that the PPP is working to fix the deficiency of the lack of Afro-Guyanese representation of the party. What do you do to fix that deficiency exactly?
Sure. So this, I dealt with this a few times in the past about what happened and the stereotypes that exist about the PPP. Historically, and what kept a lot of people away from us. So it is the same sort of whisper campaigns, the lies on the ground. When you take an issue of this nature and you spin it in the villages, that, this is a racist party, it's an Indian party. It's not true. Our party was set up in 1950 to fight for all the people of Guyana. It was to fight for freedom. That is, first of all, to get independence. And it was set up as a class-based party. That is why, although today we are seen as the more pro-business party, we are still the most pro-workers party. That's why we started and reflected in our policies. We started from zero to create a housing program for Guyana. When we took office, there was no housing program. There was no ministry, no funds. Today, by the time we left office, I'm talking about the last term, you had more Guyanese owning homes. You had over 75,000 of the 100,000 house lots were given out under 100,000. We are making a promise again to go back to that 75% of the house lots that we are producing, nearly 50,000 house lots in the next term, will be under 100,000. So I'm just saying the policies. That's why the school kids, we gave them the 10,000 grant. That's why it didn't go to PPP supporters alone. That's why we did something like we put in place the water subsidy for pensioners, the electricity subsidy. That was for Guyanese. But the entire tenure was, oh, this is a racist, this is an Indian party, you can't rise up in this party. And when Afro-Guyanese came to us, they were vilified. They were dragged, their names were dragged in the mud, they were called stooges, slaves, all sorts of stuff. Not because they believe in the program we were pursuing. And that is what, for a long time, we did not, I don't think, aggressively fight it. And we are doing that now. We're doing that, we're making the case, we're sitting down and talking to people, and we get an opportunity. I think we were deluded to some extent, that when we spoke on TV and gave these explanations, that people listened. But I told you right here that many people told me that from the time we saw a PPP person speaking on the television, we'll switch the channel. now getting a chance to interface with people directly and talking and allowing them to ask questions. You get past the stereotypes. And once we break down the stereotypes, Afro-Guyanese and most Guyanese would understand that the party that they have to belong to, everybody, almost all, people of every race and religion, is the PPP, is the party that has a national agenda for Guyanese, and that's their natural place. And so we are hoping, not by bullying or anything else, but by talking, messaging, working aggressively, to do that, to include. It's a deficiency, and that's why I said that, you know, because and we are hoping to work hard to correct it. But our campaign, our message, our activists now, you see them on the ground. If you look at the protests coming out and people coming to us, a lot of people have come to us and they're welcome here because they see what we stand for, all of Guyana.
So this perception is due to how your political opponents
Cast us, yes, cast us, and we did not do enough, I think, to fight it off. We allowed the stereotypes to exist. That's why immediately I started with the stereotypes, what they're doing once again, going back to the same old methods of trying to polarize people.
You said that you'd like to see a rollback in drainage and irrigation charges with regards to farmers. Lately, we've found out that the lack of payment of those charges is resulting in a strain on their ability to provide those services for farmers. How do you deal with that issue?
That is absolutely untrue. What they have done, the reason why in MMA and the other places, they removed the subsidy from the budget. You know, the government, central government was spending X amount of money on drainage and irrigation across the country because you get your take back from when people produce and sell their taxes, the products, you get your taxes then. So they have cut the DNI budget, they cut the farm to market roads budget. That's why you have problems in MMA, etc. And then if a person couldn't afford to pay 3.5, how could they afford to pay 15,000 per acre per year? That is the problem. It was the cutback. You check how much help the Region 5 has gotten, or MMA, from the central government. It's practically down to zero now for all of those farmers, and farmers everywhere. And it's not just farming. I'm just using that as one example. Almost every other sector. The miners too. The miners, they stop spending the money on maintenance of roads in the hinterland. So the cost of living goes up, the mining becomes more difficult, the people who were employed in forestry. But guess what didn't stop? What didn't go down? What they didn't cut was the travel budget, the food budget, and that sort of thing. The ministerial perks budget, that hasn't been touched at all. In fact, that had grown astronomically. Yes, anything?
Sir, the decision for the merger was made as a statutory meeting earlier. Wondering, were the concerns that are being raised now about this merger, were those raised at the meeting? And if they were raised,
no.
Did the chairman ignore these concerns and continue to?
I'm not at liberty to talk too much because, I'm sure people know in the real politics that both sides get their briefings. They get their briefings. I don't want to go into the great detail, but I'm sure that all the commissioners, as well as the chair, they're aware of the difficulties, the challenges of this merger. Right? They're all aware, everyone, including the APNU commissioners. And they're not stupid people. Vincent Alexander is not a stupid man, or Corbyn. They're clever, sneaky, but not stupid.
Okay, and sir, it was announced this morning that Western Destiny has arrived in Guyana's waters. So we're fast and moving towards first file. Is the PPP in the loop? Are you waiting? Do you know what is going on? Or are you just knowing what is in the public domain?
Only what's in the public domain. We don't hear anything else. What's in the public domain. That's the extent of our briefing. But And what we see in the public domain, as you know, is a cause for a lot of concerns. Right now, we believe that this government has totally abdicated any of its responsibilities and has replaced this with a PR machinery designed. I see the head of the EPA and the head of the Department of Energy just on the campaign trail now, walking all over the country, telling young people about how well they do and what model arrangements they will create, etc. And they're not doing it. And they have no intention of doing it, and they're not capable. They don't have the courage to do it. They're already compromised. They're compromised. They can't do it. They can't protect the interests of Guyana because they've been compromised. This government. Now, look at what Trotman said. Trotman said he's been following orders to sign these contracts. Whose orders? I have it here. He said, I've been following orders to sign the contract. Listen, Trotman breaks silence on 1% royalty in Orange Duke deal. Says he was following orders. Whose orders was he following to sign this? So this is something we should really pursue, because this order, and when it says break silence on 1% royalty in Orange Duke deal, can I explain this again? It's not 1% royalty. It's zero. It's zero. It says we will pay 1% royalty, but we will, your share of profit, oil, you will pay back, give us back the 1% royalty money. It's deductible. So it's zero royalty, 0% royalty. It's only an optic in the contract. It's like for optics, because it's recoverable, as you correctly, the newspapers can correctly point out, recoverable. But most Guyanese don't pick that up. They think it's 1%. But what recoverable means that is zero. We got to pay their 1% royalty for them, too, from our share of the oil. That is the problem. And so how could these people, the Trotman and whoever he is taking directions from to sign these agreements, continue to represent our interests? They're compromised, they're incompetent, they're all talk, and they're not looking out for interests. And in the meantime, you're right. Lisa, one would come here, another vessel would come here, the oil would be pumped, and then by the time we wake up one day, we are, as I said before, like we're serving all the foreigners, Guyanese. We're serving all the foreigners in our own country, and our people can't benefit from anything.
Sir, based on the current trajectory, do you see any possibility of there being elections before first oil?
We're hoping elections will be long before the end of the year. So I don't know, I don't care about first oil or not. You have first oil, second oil, last oil. It would not change. This government will not represent us better. First, second, or last oil. They've already been compromised. I mean, you wouldn't say you'd agree with me, but I'm sure you know that too. First, second, or last. It would not change anything. But we're hoping to have elections before the end of the year. You have to have some serious people sit down at the table and say, hold on a minute. First of all, to the oil companies, what are our people getting out of this? What are our people getting out of this, and to all of the other opportunities for land, etc., that they're so liberally giving out? Where are the opportunities? Why are they being placed at a disadvantage when your subcontractors can get duty-free, and for a competing investment where a Guyanese is putting up that investment and they want to supply you, they're not getting duty-free for it, and your subcontractor gets duty-free concessions to put up the same investment and then they're competing with our people. How does that help Guyanese competitively? In fact, it's stacked in favor of the people coming in.
Are we going to
So-
see a concerted effort by the PPP to perhaps challenge the merger, or are you going to just let it play out?
Oh, the merger, I don't think we go to court on that. We've gone to court now on where this issue about, so where the Constitution is clear that they should resign, but they're saying that the cabinet mustn't resign, so, will not resign, so we've gone to issue. I don't anticipate us getting there. I think that the right decisions would be made eventually because they would recognize how time-consuming it is. The sane heads would recognize how time-consuming for an activity that doesn't enhance the credibility, the so-called credibility of the list that they keep mentioning, and could be done in a shorter period by a different method.
Sir, are you still pushing for an October month?
Well, I said that the commissioners representing the opposition presented a proposal. I never pushed for anything. If I had to push, I'd push for September 18th. But they made a proposal, or they showed me a proposal that starting from that time, the elections could have been held by by the end of October. And that was their alternative to this one that pushes it to April next year using the merge database. Thank you.